We live in a microwave society, an instant gratification society where we want it right now. There's a reason why TikTok and Instagram Reels and short form content is way more popular than actually sitting down and reading a book or listening to a full length podcast. Because people, they want the sound bites. They just want the short clip. No one's life has ever changed by a 30-second clip. By reading a full length book or a whole interview, yes, for sure. I have a friend who is always sending me short little videos and tidbits and clips. And, it's interesting, good information, but often he'll send me, it's just a short little soundbite that's taken out of context. And I'll reply back. I'm like, look, this is from a full length interview that I watched last week, the whole thing. So what you're sending me, it doesn't mean what you think it does because it's taken out of context.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Rich Your Soul. Today's guest is Seth Spears, who is a serial entrepreneur that spent a lot of time working on himself. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Rich Your Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richyoursoul.com. The journey most people don't want to take is the inner journey. This is the journey that will provide you with peace, tranquility, and inner success. It's a lot of work, as you will hear. And there's so many different paths to choose from. It seems like a never-ending search with multiple layers. It's like peeling the onion. There's just another layer. Today, we're going to explore some of those and see where it takes you. Seth Spears is a business strategist for conscious, purpose-driven entrepreneurs who value mission over margin and purpose over profit. He's an adventure-loving entrepreneur, business connector, product designer, podcaster, marketing strategist, and angel investor who loves the great outdoors, deep conversation, and constant self-improvement. He's the founder and chief visionary officer of Wellnesse and the founder of Rewild Gear, mission-driven businesses promoting conservation, sustainability, and ethical practices. Let's meet Seth and learn about his journey and the lessons we can implement for ourselves. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Seth Spears. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. Really happy to be here.
And I'm excited for the conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, that's a really good question. I grew up in a large family. I'm the oldest of 6 kids, and we were all homeschooled. Grew up in Kentucky. My father worked at UPS. My mother was a retired nurse. And so there was a lot of stories around money, especially when you grow up in a big family and money is tight, and kind of growing up in a lower middle class family. I think one of the biggest lessons was hard work, the value of money, and that if you want something, you got to work for it and put in the time and the effort. And so typically that's pretty good, but it can also lead to a little bit of scarcity, or sometimes a lot of scarcity, and thinking that money has to be earned, that you have to work for it and work for it really hard, as opposed to focusing on your natural gifts and talents and letting it come to you. So there's a lot of deconstruction that I've had to do over the years to work through some of those things. But, one of the biggest things, I had jobs and chores growing up where that could have been vacuuming the house or cleaning the bathroom or washing the car or things like that that need to happen, but I would get paid for. And so I would get paid a quarter to sweep the entire house, or like a quarter to clean the bathroom. Granted, this is in the 80s, and so inflation has obviously changed that a lot, but even back then it wasn't much. So it instilled in me, if I wanted something, I had to work for it. And so I've always valued hard work and having a strong work ethic, which is very good. But then I've also had to kind of reverse engineer some of those beliefs, and that in order to actually have success or get something you want, you have to work hard, as opposed to letting your money work for you.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. When you said that, I was like, oh, do you think you have to work hard to make money still? Or have you let go of that and said, no, money can flow easily?
That's a process that I'm still working on.
Okay.
When you're in your most formative years, when we're growing up, those things that we're taught or that are kind of put before us as gospel or objective truth, that gets ingrained in there. And so I think it's a lot harder to change that, and it takes a lot more work to reverse that than if you have a little bit more, if it's not just told that this is the only way, this is the way it is, and you're seeing other examples. And maybe this is true in this time, but not in this time. Maybe it's true for some people, but not others, where it's positioned in a certain way that you think that's the only way it is. So I'm still in that process, but I've come a very long way from my very formative childhood years.
Now, out of curiosity, why did they choose to homeschool you? Do you know?
Yeah. So I was actually the first person in the state of Kentucky to be homeschooled all the way through, from kindergarten all the way through high school in the modern age. So definitely kind of groundbreaking and different than a lot of my peers. But it was mainly for religious reasons. My parents, my mother specifically, was very religious, grew up Catholic, and just felt like everything was a bad influence, that peers and other people and everything. And, my mother grew up with a lot of fear. She was probably a lot of things that happened to her as a child, or just the way she was raised or grown up, and hurt people. And so that was kind of imparted to us in so many ways, just being fearful of things. And so worried that there was bad influences, or there's things going on that she wouldn't approve of, just either morally or ethically or whatever, which I don't think that's a good way to raise kids, in my view. And I definitely chose not to do that with my own children, because if you teach your children to think critically, to be a good person, and let them make decisions for themselves, that's also how you learn. And they're probably going to do the right things. Not always, but guess what? Experience is the best teacher, unfortunately. So if you just tell someone that they're not allowed to do something and set up so many rules and boundaries so that they're not given that opportunity, they're going to push back and rebel, and they're going to do those very things that you don't want them to do. And I definitely did a lot of that.
I was going to say, you were a rebellious kid, right?
Oh, yeah. I definitely was the black sheep of the family. And because I said so was never an answer that I accepted. So I wanted to know the reason behind something. Don't just tell me that this is the way it is, or that's the rule. I want to know the reason why. And if it doesn't work with my sense of values, then I'm not going to follow it. I'm going to go my own path.
Do you know where that came from? Is that just the way you're born?
Really good question. I think it's part of, in my nature, of who I am, probably in my very DNA. And when you are raised a certain way, you do things differently. So being homeschooled, which is very different than everyone else. Catholic, Italian, in Kentucky, when there's not much of that, it's also very different as well. So you get used to being the outsider. And so then it causes me also to seek intimacy and connection and fulfillment, but also when I didn't have that as much growing up, like outside from my peers, then, running away from it too, and pushing and being okay with being different. And that served me really well as an entrepreneur. And so some of those things that I wouldn't repeat, I wouldn't wish those on my own children. I also can see the benefit of them now as an adult and realize how beneficial they were, and how that caused me to think differently, think outside the box, and question the status quo, and be willing to do things that others aren't, just because I was raised like that. But then also probably something that was just ingrained in me, just who I am too.
And I find there are certain things that we pick up in childhood that serve us well and bring us success, but then the other half of the coin flips, and then it holds us back.
100%.
Yeah, from that next level. And then you got to break through that, and never ending going forward. So clearly you're doing something different with your kids.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I have 6 children of my own, and I'm divorced as well. So co-parenting, which that's made it very interesting over the past few years. But I've always tried to raise them. I want to explain things to them. I want to teach them not what to think, but how to think. I was raised more on what to think. This is right. This is wrong. This is good. This is bad. But never to actually think critically and evaluate things based on their own merits. And just because you say this is good or bad, is that true for me? Because we all have different value systems. And so I've done my very best to just teach my children to think critically and not try to pass judgment if they come to a different conclusion than I do. And that's very hard when you grow up in a family that is very judgmental and sees everything as good or bad or black and white or right or wrong. So that's taken quite a bit of work to overcome. And it's a constant process, especially like when my youngest daughter wants to dye her hair pink. And I don't see any benefit to that whatsoever. But then also, where is that age that they can make some of those decisions on their own? So that's a constant reevaluation process of where's the line and what's the proper age so that they can make some of those decisions for themselves.
And there is no one answer, right? You got to kind of figure it out. And each kid is different.
So true.
They all need their own kind of space. And I am a big fan of classical education, which, the proponent of classical education is teaching you how to think, not what to think.
Exactly.
And going back to the core beliefs and making that all happen. And that's been super, super helpful for us, I know, for my kids.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you've been on a big path to self-development. You've also done a lot with entrepreneurship. Was there some sort of moment where these things clicked in, or was it just kind of happened? Or
So I was around personal development most of my life. As a kid growing up, my parents were involved in Amway. And so one of those, the soap company, the multi-level marketing soap company. So I saw some of these things from a young age where, because I'm not a fan of network or multi-level marketing. I think for the most part, they do a lot of harm. It's a terrible marketing system. But one of the good things about Amway was that they had this arm of the business where they really encouraged personal development and evolution and growth. And so part of that, my parents always had some of those books around, like Zig Ziglar and Norman Vincent Peale, Dale Carnegie, and some of these famous authors from like the early 20th century who were pioneers in the personal and self-development space. And so I've always been a voracious reader. And so I would see on the bookshelf, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and The Magic of Thinking Big, and Power of Positive Thinking, and, all of these books. And I would just pick them up and read them. And so I think from a young age, I was just around that so much that it kind of took root in a lot of ways, in ways that for many of my peers and others didn't have that influence or just weren't readers like myself. So I've always kind of been on that path. And then as I got older and in college, I read more. And then even after that, where I was always looking to grow and expand my mind and to learn. And especially as I got into entrepreneurship as well.
yeah, and there was another company that came up after Amway, and I think it was called Life. And I love what they did because they taught a lot of these types of things. I couldn't stand the fact that it was multi-level marketing.
Yeah.
It's like, do you always have to put the bad with the good?
Seriously.
Can you just go out and help these people and not worry about all these other things?
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that you were drawn to it as a child, because even though you're always exposed to it, many times kids are like, I'm not doing that. That's kind of weird.
I think for me, that wasn't forced. If my parents wanted me to do something, then I was going to do the opposite, as, a rebellious teenager. But it was, I would see books on the bookshelf and I had read through everything that I had gotten from the library or had read. And I'd just be curious and I would pick those up and read them. So it wasn't like they were forcing me to read these things or something. It was just more a curiosity of my own when you're just surrounded by them and you see them laying around or on the bookshelf.
Yeah, that's, kind of goes back to you are the average of the 5 people around you. And so it's subconscious, right? Those 5 people don't tell you what to do, but you start to mimic them. And so when you're in a situation where these opportunities are there, you just naturally kind of take advantage of them because they are there and they're not forced, right?
Yeah.
They're just, it's that subconscious kind of fitting in and so forth.
Yeah, I think something along those lines, I heard some motivational speakers say, and I don't remember who it was, but in 5 years, you'll be the sum total of the people you meet and the books you read. And that's always stuck with me. And so I'm a voracious reader to this day. And I've switched to audiobooks a little bit more so than actually reading, just because, or physical, like reading a book, just because it's easier, because I can be in the car or going for a walk or just doing work around the house and be consuming information that is positive and I can learn, as opposed to just be sitting there doing one particular thing.
I have found certain books for me are good for audio. Certain books I need written certain times. It depends on what I need from the book and how I need to refer back to it.
Yeah.
And whether or not there's things in the book that I need to visually see. So I use a variety of all of them.
Yeah.
And together they fit.
What's really interesting about that for me, and I've had this experience over the past few years, where there was a book that I actually physically read. So I actually had like the paperback or the hardcover, and I read it. And then a few years later, I'll go back and listen to the audiobook. And that's been really interesting just because it's hitting different parts of your brain. And so some things you may have internalized before and other things you didn't. And then it flips just because of that different medium of consumption.
That or you're in a different place.
True. No man enters the same river twice.
No, he doesn't. For it is not the same man and it is not the same river.
Indeed.
It's amazing how that happens. And so, I mean, you are highly successful, but yet there's still always this concept of we're not enough. And it seems to be throughout every single human who's willing to look in the mirror and admit it to themselves that in the back of their head, that thing is flashing, and constantly pulling them back. How did you work through that?
I think that belief system that we are not enough, part of the reason is because we're inundated by so much information. The media, social media, our peers, there's a constant comparison, and it's getting worse just because of the 24-hour news cycle and just social media and all of those things. So I don't know that you can ever fully let go of all of that. But for me, it's been going through divorce, heartbreak, almost having my business, losing that, or almost losing that, almost going bankrupt. Those things cause you to pause and take stock and realize that often our motivation for doing things, it comes from a place of lack. It comes from a need to prove yourself. For many years, for me, growing up and feeling like I was less than, or I was inferior because I was homeschooled, because my grades weren't as good, because I was different than others. And so needing to prove myself, whether that was to peers, to friends, to family, or even just to myself. So as I've done a lot of deep work on myself and kind of deconstructed what caused my marriage to end, what caused me to not be as successful in some areas as I'd like, what caused inconsistency, some of those things where I've had to get really, really clear on those aspects of me that I like, that I don't like, that I see as positive, that I see as negative. And often, they can be two sides of the same coin. So some of those things that cause me to be driven and want to be successful also cause rifts in relationships. And because what serves in one way may not serve in another. So I've had to get really clear on that and accept all those different parts of myself and just be comfortable with who I am and realize that I am enough just who I am. I've done the work. I've had success. And if that's not enough for some people, so be it. I mean, those aren't my people. My friends and my family and those who love me and accept me just for me, they're going to be there no matter what. And so it's just coming to terms with who I am as a man, who I am as a father, who I am as a person in general. And then you're always going to strive to be better and to improve, but not let that stop me from accepting where I'm at, because there's always more to do. There's always more layers of that I need to peel back and keep working on.
Yeah, I think that's been the most surprising thing for me is the fact that every time you peel a layer, It's like, damn it, there's another layer.
Seriously.
It's almost like a never ending type of battle. And it's funny. Well, and I think that's the purpose of life, is to keep peeling your layers. And it seems like it might take a couple of lives to get through them all, depending on your spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, I've thought about this quite a bit over the past couple of years, and really within the past 6 months, because I've done so much deep work on myself, everything from different types of therapy to psychedelics to reading and listening and different modalities, where there's always more to do, and it can be never ending. And I went to an event last year. It was kind of like a personal development, masculine and feminine polarity retreat event. And I met quite a few people there, and it was like, this is their entire lives, just going to events and constantly working. And some of these people were life coaches or relationship coaches. I'm like, okay, wait, and we're doing activities together and just, learning from each other and stuff. And so then they're telling me this, and I'm thinking, okay, I just had this experience with you, and I see where you are in your life and what you're doing, but then you're trying to learn it, but then you're just going out and teaching it. It seemed to be a disconnect. And it seemed like there's so many people that it's kind of like the wounded healer, where they have so much lack in their own lives or so much trauma or things that have happened. So then they feel the need where they have to go out and help others, but they're never fully integrated and they're never just living life. It's just this constant treadmill of doing more work and learning and growing, but they're never stopping to actually live. And I've seen that way too much in the self-help and coaching communities, where it's selling people on their lack. You're not enough. You have to do more if you want to be successful or get the relationship you want or have the business that you want and all this. And it's like, enough already. You have the tools. You have the information. How about we just live? Let's go grab a beer. Let's not just talk about our trauma all the time. There's a time and a place for that. But after a while, take a pause, take a breath, just live life, have fun. You can always go back to it later on and continue to do more.
Yeah, see, to me, that's a little strange what they're doing. Because to me, it's, hey, I'm moving forward and I'm going to a place where I get to play and have fun. Now, on the way there, I might find some baggage and I might have to unpack it and throw it away. And that's kind of the way I look at it is, all right, we're going to go have fun and we're going to enjoy life. And if baggage comes up, we'll deal with it. We'll let go of it and we'll be one step higher towards our goal. But we're going to go have fun and do other things and not spend all our time in the muck. I mean, that's got to be draining to live life like that, I would think.
I think so. I think there's a couple reasons for it. One, I think the industry preys on that. It preys on that fear. It preys on those insecurities that people have. And so it enables those that have something to sell to make money and to build up their status and their career and what they're doing. And then also for those people that are partaking in it constantly, they self-identify as that. And that's their community. And so their entire identity is wrapped up in constant evolution and growth and change and constant improvement. And while as a whole, that's not bad, it's not a negative, it does lack that balance that I think we all need, because balance is a moving target. And so you can't have it all at once. It's playing it out over a long period of time. And there's a season for everything. And so I think it's just realizing that you can't just be nonstop at one thing all the time. You'll get burnt out.
Do you know if they're actually making money? Because the dirty little world in the world of life coaching, 90+% of coaches make 4 figures, not a lot. And so I'm just wondering if they're actually getting anywhere or if they're literally stuck in their own patterns and don't know what else to do.
It's a really good question. I think there are some people that do make a whole lot, and they're the ones that actually have done the work and are doing it. They have created a business that works and it is successful. But I think there's a lot of wannabes. I had a call with someone a couple of years ago who was a life coach, and he was trying to sell me on his program. And what he was saying sounded great and everything. And then I started asking some questions. he was 27 years old, maybe 25 years old. I'm like, okay, you do not have enough life experience to be coaching me on anything. You've never been married. You've never started a business. You've just gone through a couple of seminars and coaches, and now you're a life coach and think you have the ability to teach me something. It's kind of like when I was in college and I was a business major, and I didn't respect those professors who had never started a business because they're just teaching theory, but have never done it. I don't want information from someone who just they're a philosopher. They're theorizing on something, but they never had the boots on the ground and they don't have the experience, never put in the time, the work, and the effort. So I want to learn from those people who have been through it. They've come out the other side, and experience is our best teacher, unfortunately. So, but, to your question, are they making any money? I think that some do, but most don't. And that's why often the vast majority of these coaches that I see anyway, they're doing so many different things. Like, they're not only just offering their coaching services, but maybe they're a massage therapist, or they're selling something on the side, and they're involved in a multi-level marketing company. And because they don't have the self-discipline or the consistency to go into one thing and to be successful there. And so they have to throw lines in all these different directions to try to make ends meet. And so that, at the end of the day, will be their downfall, and the reason why they won't be successful at any one thing, because they're not willing to dedicate themselves and put in enough time and effort to see it through.
And you have to have the gifts to be an expert in a particular area, right? I spent a lot of time in the personal finance space. That's kind of where and what we would see is there would be people, I was in massive debt and I got out of massive debt and now my life is wonderful. And they're teaching everyone else how to get out of massive debt. But when you start listening to them, you're like, oh, you actually don't know anything about money, do you? You weren't smart enough to stay out of debt. You hit a bad spot. You clawed your way out through doing X, Y, Z, which worked for you. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone else, right? Just because it worked for you at that time. And then they kind of think of themselves as a financial expert. When you start to have conversations, you're like, oh my God, you are probably going to go broke again.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's probably the same thing in this space. It's not like, I did this one thing and now I'm a expert at it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of spiritual bypassing that happens in these industries and these communities, where they see an issue everywhere else, but they're missing it within themselves. And it's kind of like, what is that scripture verse about? Quit trying to pull the plank out of your brother's eye when you have one in your own.
Yeah, it's stop pulling the splinter out of your brother's eye when you have a log in your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, very true. You mentioned plant medicines. How has that helped you?
Yeah, so I originally got introduced to plant medicine probably close to 10 years ago. And it was kind of like an accidental thing where I had just done a little bit. It was a lot more than I thought. And walking down the street and seeing buildings move, and just kind of had a freak out moment. And then I didn't do anything for probably 5 or 6 years. And then the next time I did, and that initial experience was with psilocybin, with mushrooms. And then the next time that I did, it was a much more intentional experience where it was psilocybin again, and put on a blindfold, put on music, and just kind of went internal and just, kind of dealt with my own internal shit. And so that was probably really my first foray into it. And then I've done quite a bit over the past several years, especially going through divorce, separating, having life completely turned upside down, and having to really look internal, like, what were the reasons behind this? What do I need to change? What in my life, where are my shadows at? What came from my past, from my parents, from how I was raised, from friendships, from relationships, and all of those things that I need to unpack and look at just outside of that tunnel vision that we typically go through life with, so I can really analyze it and see how can I become a better version of myself.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. You said something extremely interesting there. And maybe you noticed it, maybe you didn't. And I think a lot of people may have missed it. You didn't blame anybody for your life. You looked inside and said, what have I done? What are my issues? How am I going to fix me? And you looked in the mirror. You didn't say, oh, that woman I married, did this or that, or life threw this or that at me, or I have bad luck. And I think that is the one thing most people miss is they look at the world and blame it instead of looking in the mirror and asking themselves.
It's really easy to put on the victimhood hat and just have the blame mentality of, oh, if only this would have happened, if only this person would have done that or that person would have, then life would be great. Yeah, we can do that, but at the end of the day, that's out of our control. The only thing that's in our control is ourselves, how we react to a situation. The nature, the human condition, the one thing that ties us all together is suffering. There's not a human alive that has not gone through something challenging, something hard that has caused us to suffer. It is the tie that binds the entire human race. And so knowing that, we can't just blame everyone else, because then it's just all of humanity blaming each other for their issues or challenges. We have to look internal and say, okay, this happened. I can't change that. All I can change is my outlook and perception around it. And what can I learn from it? And how can I grow and improve so that I don't make that same mistake next time? Because when challenging things come up, we can either choose to get bitter or get better. And fortunately, and maybe that goes back to all the reading that I did as a kid and throughout the years of positive thinking and looking at things objectively. I haven't always done this, but in those things that have been the most challenging for me in life, when something has been really hard or monumental, life-changing, that could be seen as a negative, I typically looked internal. Okay, what do I need to change? How can I use this to improve or to up-level myself and not just pass blame? And that's not always easy, and I definitely have not always been successful at it. But I think as a whole, most of my life, I've been able to take positive steps forward just looking at it like that.
And one of the things you did, and I am not familiar with this, it's kind of new to me, is something called the DeMartini method. Mm-hmm. And that kind of helps with the past trauma, the disappointments, business challenges. And when I talk about trauma, I'm talking about small t trauma, like, those little things that happen to you that everyone told you, oh, that's no big deal, shake it off. And you didn't shake it off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point about the small t trauma. And often those are harder to work through and get past than the big T, because it's these small little things repeated over time and they just kind of stack up. How there's something big, you know exactly what it is and you're able to dial in and work through that, which is really interesting because we tend to place more emphasis on the big T trauma than the smaller T trauma. But yeah, the DeMartini method. So I worked with a therapist several years ago that specialized in this technique. So Dr. John DeMartini, I believe he's a psychologist, and he does seminars and has written books and podcasts and has a whole process and method for helping people to work through those things in their life that are challenging and hard. But the DeMartini method, they call it the DeMartini collapse. And so basically it takes something that could be triggering to you or some aspect of life, and it looks at what are the positives, what are those things that are really good or you see as positive outcome, and then what are the negatives, what are those things that aren't as good. And it helps you to deconstruct these and collapse them so that it's not, so the things that you think are really good, you collapse it down and looking at what are the bad things about that, what was the shadow side of it, so that it collapses it down so it's not such a high. And those things that you see as a negative, what are the positive outcomes because of that? So it collapses that down as well. So the charge is removed. So instead of having those peaks and valleys, those highs and those lows, you're able to reduce the charge around it. So it's a little bit more of a stoic outlook. And so it balances it out. So then you don't have those highs and those lows, and it reduces those triggers that come up around that particular thing that happened to you.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think I've heard of other methodologies that are very similar to that, but different. Like they use their own method, but the outcome is the same, which is to turn down the noise on the past event so that it isn't so jarring or triggering or any of those types of things. And I think that's a big part of it. And, you know, it's a question of what's going to work for you, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you got to kind of figure out is which of these different ones are going to be the one that clicks in you and
Yeah.
helps you let go.
Yeah, because there's no one size fits all. We're also different, both genetically, biologically. And I've tried multiple different modalities over the years. Another one that's really good is a process that my friend Stephanie Kwong does called the rapid rewire method. And so it takes you through a process to break down those things and do similar to the DeMartini method. But there's different aspects of it. And for some people, it's way more beneficial than others. So again, there's so many tools and resources out there when we're working through things. And I think it's just throwing stuff at the wall to see what works for each person, but also giving it enough time and effort to not just like rush through it and skip over the parts that'll really help.
Well, you have to do the work and you have to go inside. You can't. And I guess some people will and some people won't. And that's a choice that they make. You know, it's funny. When I go to a lot of these events, what I see as who's in the crowd or who's participating all tends to be highly successful people, business owners or senior leadership. The people who need it most, the people who are stuck, never seem to show up or never seem to do the work, which is kind of a shame to do that. And honestly, I've been surprised at how much entrepreneurs are doing the inner work. And I guess you almost have to. When you got to make payroll and figure all these big decisions out and, you know, put out fires every day, you tend to be drawn to that, I guess, or you're trying to deal with it much more so. And you have to deal with your own noise, right? Of, hey, it's business success or business failure, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know what you found.
So I don't know if this is kind of one of those chicken or egg scenarios or not. Are entrepreneurs more likely to go to therapy, or those that are more likely to go to therapy also more likely to be entrepreneurs? I don't know the answer there. I think in a world when the vast majority of our needs are met, like our Maslowian hierarchy of needs are taken care of, we're not just in relationships or working just for survival anymore. And so we have time to think about some of these other concepts, like what does it mean to be self-actualized? What is fulfillment? What is my purpose? Does this serve me or does it not? When if you're just in your day-to-day and just fighting to make ends meet, you don't have time to think about those things. But again, like everything, there's a positive and a negative here. Ignorance really is bliss. If you're just living life and just going to your job and that's it, I mean, there's something that's kind of just comforting and simple about that. And at the same time, I wouldn't change the life that I have and not having that simplicity just because it's my own constant learning and constant growth and just curiosity, even though it can be more challenging. And, you know, you're dealing with employees and starting a business and almost failing and, you know, never feeling like it's good enough or, you know, it's either going up or down. And you can't just go home at the end of the day and just let it rest because there's so many people that are dependent upon you. And so it's a blessing and a curse, like so many aspects of life.
It is. Everything has two sides, and there is always a positive and a negative, and things that made you successful may not take you to the next level that you want to go. And so that's always the truth. Let's just talk about one more thing, and then I do want to talk about business. So breathwork, somatic healing, been super helpful for you?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found really helpful as far as my own mental outlook on life is sauna and cold plunge. Those are two aspects that I try to do almost every day. And I usually incorporate breath work into that. I've done a decent amount of breath work over the years as well, probably one of the first experiences that I had. My buddy Josh Trent, he runs a podcast called Wellnesse plus Wisdom. He's also a breathwork instructor. When I was really in the heart of it, the separating out and divorcing, I was just, in the throes of that heartbreak and just what is life going to be like and everything getting turned upside down. And so I reached out to him for support, and he was really instrumental in just some of these modalities, like some of those somatic and breathwork experiences that were very cathartic and helped me to process through some of those things that I was going through. And so I think for many people, breathwork is something that's free. We all have it. It creates DMT in the body. So it is the original psychedelic. So we don't actually need all these extraneous substances to help do that. For some people, it's much harder to get into those states by themselves, and so they need something extra. But breathwork is amazing for that. And the somatic side as well. I've worked with several different somatic practitioners over the years because the body keeps the score. The name of the Bessel van der Kolk's best-selling book around that topic. And when hard things come about, we tend to internalize that. And especially as Americans that are very driven and go get it, and we tend to stuff our emotions down. And that often manifests itself in sickness and ailment and muscle aches and autoimmune conditions. And so using some of these modalities and tools that can help release that and help to just make us healthier and better. So I definitely recommend accessing these whenever possible.
And I concur with you. I think there are a lot of physical conditions, disease, that are manifestations of what we're holding on to.
Totally.
And they show up in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. And I think it's worth exploring. Our current medical system doesn't look at any of that. Doesn't have any way to measure it. And all they do is give you a pill or cut something out and hope for the best. And it usually not the best answer, but you got to do the heavier work. And that's what it keeps coming back to, right?
Yeah, I've been in the health and wellness space for many, many years, including the educational side and then product creation, like biohacking and things as well. And so I've seen all these different elements. And you can do all the things from a health perspective, but if you don't address those internal things, the mental and emotional side, you still don't have it all. And I think allopathic medicine, they miss that side entirely. They're not looking at those other factors, all those toxins that we're partaking of daily, whether that's our food, our water, our soil, our air. And so reducing our toxic load is so incredibly important just for our physical health, and reducing those mental and emotional toxins that are so adversely affect us as well. So I think it's all about a holistic outlook on everything that's related to mind, body, and spirit.
And that's what it comes down to. I know I've been working a lot I have a longevity doctor that I work with now to help me look at all those different things, do all of the baseline testing to make sure that, the big things are not an issue and that I am in good, healthy space, but then it's eating clean, it's exercising, it's doing all the things to make sure that we maintain it. At my age, I want to age gracefully and I want to still be active, when I'm well into my later years. And so you got to do the work early, because at a certain point you hit a tipping point and by then it's too late and you can't recover. So I've been very diligent to focus on that and do the work and make choices in that space as much as I can.
There's a compounding effect that happens when it comes to your physical health. The same with money. The more money you make early on and that compounds with interest, it's the same with your health. If you do those things from a young age and instill those good, healthy habits, whether that's your diet, your exercise, getting lots of sunlight, and drinking clean water, and all these aspects that we need, the younger you are when you start doing these things, that will pay dividends later. Because after a while, your body gets worn down and then it's harder to take care of. The same as like if you have a car. If you don't change the oil at first, it's going to have a lot of adverse effects down the road, as opposed to if you take care of it when you first get it, as it gets older, it's going to last a lot longer.
And I don't think people look at long-term. I've come to realize people don't look at long-term consequences or long-term results. We have a society and a culture of today, this moment, not what's going to happen 6, 12 months, 12 years, 20 years? Like, what is the future plan and how do we build towards that?
This is a topic that I could talk about all day long. We live in a microwave society, an instant gratification society where we want it right now. There's a reason why TikTok and Instagram Reels and short form content is way more popular than actually sitting down and reading a book or listening to a full length podcast. Because people, they want the sound bites. They just want the short clip. But no one's life was ever changed by a 30-second clip. By reading a full length book or a whole interview, yes, for sure. I have a friend who is always sending me short little videos and tidbits and clips. And, it's interesting, good information, but often he'll send me, it's just a short little soundbite that's taken out of context. And I'll reply back, I'm like, look, this is from a full-length interview that I watched last week, the whole thing. So what you're sending me, it doesn't mean what you think it does because it's taken out of context. If you actually go and watch the whole thing, you see and understand why, and it would change the way you look at and evaluate this entire subject matter. But he's not willing to do that because his attention span, and he just likes the short little sound bites. This goes back to maybe how I was raised and thinking differently or thinking outside the box. And so I like that longer form content. I want to get the meat and potatoes and all of it and not just the sound clips, even though it seems like we're fighting a battle here because we need those shorter little clips to use for marketing to get people to go to the longer form, which is really unfortunate, but I'm not sure how you change it.
Well, you just don't participate yourself. I can't change everyone else. I can work on me. It's funny because what I have found when I look at a headline or a title or an article and I'm like, what? And then I start reading it. I'm like, well, that study didn't say that. Yeah. You just made up the headline or you took something and you misconstrued it. Yeah. And the problem is people don't take the time to look and dig. And I think if they did, they would.
It's clickbait.
But that's their choice.
The entire industry and everything is just designed to get attention, to get eyeballs. And I think this originally started with the tabloids in the grocery store. You're in line at the grocery store checking out and you have tabloids with all these crazy headlines that then you read into it and it's not actually about what it said. The whole point of it is just designed to get people to pick it up and want to buy it and to make sales.
Yeah, but that was only like 5 minutes once a week when you went to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Now it's 24/7 everywhere you go.
Exactly. We're inundated with it.
You are inundated.
So I'm really big into spending time outdoors, in nature. I actually started a company in the outdoor space called Rewild Gear to encourage men to get back into nature and spend more time and to disconnect from technology and everything that's going on and spend more time with family and friends. And so I launched this company with my brothers a few years ago. It's been my fun little side project. But as part of that, we did a team retreat. And so we went into the backcountry in Montana with some friends. We were out there for like 5 days. And so when you're camping out in nature, deep in the wilderness in grizzly bear country, in tents or under the stars for that long, it takes a little while for your body to reset. But it does reset your circadian rhythm. And so what's interesting, one of the guys who was one of our guides for this camping trip, this backpacking trip, he made a statement that has really affected me. He said, our brain was originally designed as a sponge to soak up as much information as possible. But in this day and age, because we're inundated with so much information, it's now had to become a filter, and it wasn't designed to do that. So when you leave here, your entire nervous system has had time to downregulate. Your circadian rhythm has been reset. You're basically allowing all of your cells to get out of fight or flight and to just downregulate and just be more restful and healthier. But when you go back out into the default world and then you're driving, you see TV and text messages and emails and all of this, it's like a total game changer for your entire nervous system where it's like, what is going on? It has this freak out mode. And I experienced that. When we left that trip and everything came back online, I'm getting constant notifications on my phone. And we stopped to eat at a restaurant and the TV is on and the news and people is like, what's going on? And you have this freak out moment because we were never meant to be, our biology haven't caught up with this modern day of all the technology and info overload that we're constantly subjected to.
I don't know if our biology is ever going to catch up or we're just going to turn it off. We just ignore it, not pay attention. Because honestly, I think that's the best way to go. My phone is always on silent. It does not ring because I don't want it to.
Yeah.
I've learned to not respond to things immediately. I've learned that if I let them sit, they solve themselves.
Yeah.
So, but it's taken work to let go of all of that.
Sure.
And I've even done the same thing with emails to filter out the majority of my emails so that I will only see them when I'm ready to see them, and then I'll deal with them quickly. And only the handful that I need to see come through. So that's a big part of it is being able to do that. You've spent, as you've mentioned, a lot of time in business. And I find, a couple of things surprising. I think some people go into business to make money, but not because they loved it. And I think they struggle in that space. But I think you can build a business you love, that's fun, that's enjoyable, that's serve. I mean, I know I did it, but I reverse engineered to say, how do I want my life to work? How does my business fit my life? Not how can I work 70 hours a week and kill myself for this business? Because that's not fun.
Yeah.
How have you been able to kind of create that balance and also deal with the ups and downs? Because you've had quite a few ups and downs over the years.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think balance is a moving target and it's a constant evolution of learning how to do that. But for me now, so my primary business is Wellnesse. We're a B Corp certified brand of all natural personal care products, primarily in the oral care space. And we made some very strategic errors starting out launching that company with some poor hires, not inspecting what I expected. The company almost went under. And so we've had to turn that around. And not so long ago, I hired a CEO to come in and run the day-to-day operations. And so that's given me more flexibility and freedom to do what I'm better at, business development, big picture thinking, strategy, new connections and partnerships. And that's great. And I love it. And also it's been a challenge because if I'm not doing all those things day to day, it's caused me the question, where is my value? What am I actually bringing to the table now? Where do I fit into my own company that I started? So it's been a really interesting process to kind of sit with that and have some tough conversations with my CEO and just with myself and making sure that my ego is not getting involved here and not stepping on toes and, having those boundaries and the communication that's needed in order to make sure things are successful and they're growing. So it's a moving target. And I don't know that I have a great answer about how best to do that as I'm still trying to figure that out every day.
Some questions are unanswerable, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, and this is where I think a lot of business owners struggle, you have to understand the numbers. And you have to understand what's going on in your business. And you have to save for a rainy day.
Yeah.
And I find it's the same thing as personal finance, right? We all overspend in our personal finance. At least a lot of people do. I don't. I'm learned that. It's overspending, and then it's also just not even paying attention to what's coming, what's going. And these are the same people who then become business owners, and they take those financial habits in there. And in a company, things can move quickly up and down, and you got to be on top of it.
Very true.
I don't know what you've found.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. When it comes to business in general, there's so many ways to make money. I tend to focus on I like the Japanese concept of ikigai. The Venn diagram.
Yes.
What you're good at, what you enjoy, and where there's a need in the market. And so I try to look at that.
And they're willing to pay for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because if they're not willing to pay for it.
Yeah, totally. When I say need in the market, I mean, I kind of include that in there. So I'm also a big fan of personality tests, both for myself and for my team, so we can understand where they fit into the company hierarchy and those roles that they have. Because sometimes you hire for a certain position, and while on paper it sounds good, that's not something that they're either as good at or that they enjoy. And so even if you're good at something, if you hate it, you're probably going to burn out. But if you love something and you're not good at it, that doesn't fit either, you know? And so I think it's finding that overlap, which is so important if you really want to be successful for the long term.
What personality tests do you like?
So I am fascinated by all of them, and I've taken probably 70 different ones, 75. I'm fascinated by the more esoteric ones: astrology, human design, gene keys, numerology. Those that are a little bit more business focused: wealth dynamics, Colby, DISC, Fascinate, Logos. There's so many different ones, and I think we can learn from all of them. And so what my interest right now is, how can I find the common denominators with all of those, and to, you know, use AI to analyze some of these things and spot patterns that I'm missing. Because, you know, with larger data sets, you've got more information that you can analyze. So I can understand more about me and what I should focus on. And I've done some of this with my team as well. So there's not one test that I just love and I think is the end all be all. I think they all have pros and cons, and you can learn from all of them. And so by combining multiple ones together, that's where you're going to get a bigger picture and more holistic view of who someone is and what they're best at, what they should avoid.
And I concur. Each of them has their own place. Some are better for certain job titles than others are, depending on what you're looking for, but they give you a picture into how people behave. And I think that's the part that people mistake. It's like, just because your resume says you're good at X doesn't mean you'll fit the culture, doesn't mean you behave well. I mean, these days, everybody tells the 30-second highlight reel, which is exactly what the resume is.
Of course.
And so no one's going to put on there, you know, I crashed the company and we dropped sales 20% since I took over, or whatever it is that's there. I created a mess and started fires every day. Or that they got laid off, or not laid off, but let go from a particular place. So
yeah, I think, and this is where I'm fascinated by the two sides of these: nature versus nurture. And I feel like those more esoteric ones, that's nature, who we came into the world as, what we're naturally gifted and talented in. And then the nurture side, what we've learned, those experiences that we've had, those jobs and things that we've gotten into that we've learned from, both positively and negatively. And so I think incorporating both of those, then you get a better, more true picture of who someone is, and not just what they're saying they are.
And that's the key. We don't usually find out till it's too late who they really are.
Yeah, very true.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life. That's a question I've never been asked before. I've had to do a lot of work around this, around abundance as opposed to scarcity. And I think it is recognizing my own gifts and talents, and that there's always more that we can learn, that we can gain. And so when I hear abundance, I typically am thinking about it in a financial aspect. And I mean, that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah.
And I think it could mean multiple different things. My rules for life, though, and I've kind of adopted these over the past few years, are these four things: be kind, be curious, have fun, and don't waste. And so I try to look at all aspects of life and people that I come in contact with based upon those. Granted, don't do it perfectly and constantly have to evaluate every day. But those are the four rules that I try to use every day.
Yeah, and I think for me, abundance is more than just a dollar amount. I think it's hard to have, actually, I shouldn't even say that, because I don't think it's true at all. Abundance is a mindset. You can have abundance even when you have nothing. And I think what it's more of is freedom.
Yeah.
You know, freedom from all that noise, freedom to live how you choose, freedom to live congruently to who you want to be.
I think that's a good point. And I think the most important thing that we have is our time, because we can always make more money. We can always get more energy. We can't get more time. We don't know how much time we're going to be given, but we know that we all have 24 hours in a day. And so it's what we do with that is the most important thing.
That it is. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Oh, man, there's so many things here. What did I learn later in life that I wish I would have learned sooner? I don't need to try to be someone else. I can just be me. I'm good enough as I am, that I am enough, that I have a really good intuition. And if I just listen to that, then things are going to turn out okay. But it's when I try to outsource that to others that's when things go belly up.
Massive learning. And I think it's one that everyone needs to learn, that you were created for you. Stop trying to be who you aren't.
There's only one of me. Everyone else is already taken. So
Yeah.
I just be the one that I have.
There's only one of me, and I'm the best at it.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Never stop learning. Be curious. Don't prejudge things. And often the things that we prejudge, they're going to surprise us if we would just go into it with a little bit more curiosity and less judgment.
And I think because you were homeschooled, they didn't kill your curiosity. That is one thing school is very good at, taking curiosity out of, the equation. No, this is the way you do it, and everything else is irrelevant. It's kind of funny how that is.
Yeah.
If people would like to learn more about you and all your companies, how can they do that?
Sure. SethSpears.com is my personal website. We've got links to all my social media there. And then Wellnesse, which is my primary company, WELLNESSE.com. And you can find all about what we're up to over there.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rocky. I really enjoyed it.
Any ahas that make you want to go deeper? The modalities we talked about are mainstream in my world. This is what people like us do to improve ourselves and be at inner peace. Like I said at the beginning, it's like peeling an onion. There's always another layer below, and you just keep going. And as time goes on, you find yourself content with life, having fun, playing by your rules without a care of what someone else thinks. It's your life. Live it on your terms. Next week, we've got Laura Hamill on to talk about the power of culture. We get to pick our culture in our family, in our work, in our business. You got to spend time on that too. By the way, do you know someone who would enjoy listening to today's episode and maybe get something out of it? Would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.